Welcome to everyone on Zoom and our team members and staff who are in Minogue conference room in person. They are getting a rose today. It was Mary's favorite flower, and so anyone coming into Minogue today is receiving a flower, a rose flower in memory of Mary. Good evening to Susan Walker, who is our featured presenter. She joined us all the way from London. It's 5 o'clock there, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I'm honored to welcome you all here today. We have a lot of things to celebrate as they all came together to form this very special event. First, as you know, it's Women's History Month, and women have been central to the history of medicine and health. And I want to offer a special thank you to the team members who are women at Rankin Jordan. We thank you deeply for everything you do for the kids, but also carrying out Mary's legacy here in St. Louis. Second, Rankin Jordan will celebrate its 80th anniversary next month. Yay! Third, we've reconnected with our founder's great niece, Susan Walker, who recently uncovered a breadth of family history, including much about her great aunt, Mary Rankin Jordan. And so all these moments came together that led our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council to request time with Susan so we can learn more about our founder and celebrate her during Women's History Month. As I mentioned, Susan joins us from London. I had the pleasure of meeting her several years ago, and then again a year and a half ago when she donated some of Mary's prized possessions and toured our hospital. Susan brought a family Bible. As you'll learn, faith was a central part of Mary's life, and so we have the all-important family Bible in our possession. The one thing I also remember about Susan's last visit is she did a radio interview on public radio here in St. Louis, and it made me feel so good because Susan said after visiting with us at the hospital that it felt as if Mary were right around the corner, and I thought that was a real testament to the people we have here today and how much you care and how much we love carrying on Mary's legacy here. I know we're both looking forward to safe travels so we can celebrate the hospital anniversary together. I look forward to visiting Susan in her home, going to England someday and having her come back here. So before I hand it off to Susan, there's just a few items I want to cover. Susan's going to present for about a half an hour, and then we'll open it up for questions. You may enter questions anytime in the chat box at the bottom of your computer screen. Please make sure you're muted during your presentation until the question and answer session. We are going to record this session, and so it'll be available on our website and YouTube tomorrow. And then Susan's going to share her contact information at the end in case you have more questions for Susan. So without further ado, let us celebrate Women's History Month at Rankin Jordan and give a warm welcome to our founder's great niece, Susan Walker.
Thank you very much indeed, Brett. You may all be wondering why I'm wearing a hat and I'm indoors, but it's to remember my great Aunt Mary's love of hats, which I think you're sharing as well. So imagine a dinner party with place settings from women from ages past. The inspiration for artist Judy Chicago's symbolic history of women in civilization, particularly relevant in this Women's History Month. The dinner party installation, now in Brooklyn Museum, and when you get the chance to go and see it, I really recommend it. Some there are famous and others unknown, so History Month can retrieve these lost life stories. Not that Mary's been forgotten, but she certainly didn't seek publicity, indeed actively hid her own good deeds. But she was proud to celebrate her Rankin name and that of her husband Clay Jordan, hence Rankin Jordan Pediatric Bridge Hospital. Our Rankin forebears have a long history in Scotland as hereditary pipers to the Clan Maclean on the Isle of Mull. They also played their bagpipes, and the courageous Rankin pipers placed at the right flank in battles of their Maclean laird, leading the charge with the cry of Bas no Deathi, death or life. Mary's first known direct ancestor was David Rankin, born over 350 years ago. Aged 20, he left his Ayrshire Scottish home for the north of Ireland. The actual journey was easy, only 7 miles across the sea to the other coast, but much harder to leave home and family. It was a push-pull decision, push being the persecution of the Presbyterian faith, and the pull of the opportunities offered to this land to the west. David found his new home in the beautiful Derry countryside, about 50 miles from the capital, Belfast. But it wasn't a peaceful time, and here we meet our first brave woman from the hidden past. When the besieged inhabitants of Derry town were starving, David's sister, Margaret Rankin, crept in with food. She was wounded, but later that compassionate heroism was rewarded with a pearl necklace from the king. The Rankins prospered in the linen business, from growing the flax to manufacturing the famous Irish linen still prized today. But the eyes of the youngsters look westwards. We know this from a family memoir. There were beautiful views in every direction, but of the greatest interest was always the broad sweep of the Atlantic Ocean. We were fascinated by the large white-sailed ships setting off to cross the Atlantic. 20-year-old Marcus, Mary's grandfather, couldn't resist, emigrating to Philadelphia in 1832. Here he wed, and Sarah, Mary's mother, was born an American citizen. When his wife died, Marcus took little Sarah back to Ireland to be brought up by his own mother. Our memoir tells us she was gentle and God-fearing, training her children in the principles of upright Christian living and compassion for the afflicted, the Holy Bible being her inspiration and guide. Other family members also head to the west, one being Mary's father, Thomas Rankin. He went to St. Louis, where family members had settled. Here he joined his brother in nearby Diamond City, Montana, to prospect for gold. Now, Diamond City is rather a misleading name for this rough prospectors camp. It actually earned its name from the intersection of its 6 roads, not from precious diamonds. Thomas was also an adventurous traveller, but returned to his Irish home to settle down. Here, he wed Sarah in 1867. The couple then travelled back to St. Louis to meet with relations, and then back to Ireland via, well, where else for honeymoon? Niagara Falls. They lived in Lisboy House, the fine Rankin family home built in the 17th century. Thomas took to the quieter life of farming, and here our Mary Rankin was born in 1867. But sadly, just 3 years later, Thomas died. Now, in those days, a woman like Sarah from an affluent family learned to embroider, paint, play the piano a little, and to perhaps manage her husband's household, not for business affairs or farming. So Sarah must have planned a different future for her daughter with a good practical education. And here I introduce you to another significant woman from the past, Margaret Byers. She was a teacher whose time in New York showed that education there was the same for girls as it was for boys. So when she returned to Ireland, she brought this revolutionary idea with her and established the Ladies' Collegiate College, now Victoria College, in Belfast. This was the school that Mother Mary chose. Here, Mary studied grammar, arithmetic, geometry, geography, history, and science. Quite an education for those days, and one which stood her in good stead for an independent, productive life, as we'll see. There was also one lesson here that she took very much to heart. For Principal Margaret Byers, previously a missionary in China, was a staunch believer in helping the less fortunate and involved the girls in charitable activities like hospitals. She said, "I've sought to make the homes for destitute children in Belfast a community for the training of our educated girls in caring for their less prosperous sisters." What echoes from the past that resonate today? Aged 18, Mary left school. By now, Sarah had married dashing young farmer John McMurtry and had 4 children under 10 to keep her busy. Home was Achidui House, now tumbled, and that's the polite Irish way of saying demolished. But it had been a grand house dating back to the musketry 1600s with 3-foot thick walls surrounded by battlements and portholes. Very historic, but not much fun for a teenager used to the livelier life of girls her own age in a stimulating Belfast school. One of the most exciting events Mary went to then with her mother and stepfather was the Farmers Tenants Association in the local hall, with highlights of bonfire, fireworks, and a few bursts of gunfire to celebrate. Exciting for Mary? I don't think so. No wonder she welcomed her Rankin uncles' visits from St. Louis and their tales for life there. So, like her grandfather before, her eyes turned westwards across the ocean. Uncles Hugh and John invited her to join them. So then, and more echoes in the past, at 20, the same age as her distant ancestor David and Marcus, her grandfather, she stepped aboard a ship to a new life. Taking just one large trunk, in May 1889, she set off. Now, we're used to air travel today, and the transatlantic journey might take about 8 hours. Then it would have been at least 8 days, longer in bad weather, and dangerous. Not all the ships reached their destination safely. A young woman was brave to undertake the journey. Arriving in St. Louis, she joined her uncles in the historic Southern Hotel, now demolished, which was on the corner of 4th and Walnut Streets. Here was excitement in this lively, vibrant city, growing to be the USA's 4th largest. Mary soon became a belle of St. Louis, and I have a picture here to show you of her as that wonderful belle of St. Louis. And the local press reported that she usually entertained in a delightful and dignified way. And again, here's a report. Miss Mary Rankin gave a reception at the Southern for her young lady friends. The receiving place was decorated with flowers, where about 100 well-known society ladies partook of her hospitality. Undoubtedly, she was indulged by her fond uncles. Hugh Rankin was in the fast-developing real estate and real stock areas, while John Rankin established a major industrial manufacturing plant. Of course, Mary had her serious side. She was able to use her education at last to work closely with her uncles to learn more about business and finance, skills she put to such good use in later years. She also became involved with the community and charity works, and an early commitment was the St. Louis Union of King's Daughters, where she soon showed her leadership qualities by becoming a president in 1898. Speaking about that purpose, we can hear what she said across the years. Our order demands not only doing, but above and beyond the being. Your work is within, living righteousness, which is righteousness in thought and will, and all things great and small. Among her friends, one became a special companion. Etty Jordan was a member of the King's Daughters too, and of the Second Presbyterian Church, as was Mary. The two young women shared an enthusiasm for travel, soon embarking on a lifetime exploration of the world, from the culture of Italian cities to exotic Japan and meetings with indigenous tribes in New Guinea. Quite the travelers. And closer to home, they would have visited the famous St. Louis Fair, especially as her father's cousin, David Rankin, founder of the Technical College, was on the organizing committee. Now, when we turn back the pages of time, there are things that we can only guess. Why can't we find any suitors for this eligible young lady? Where were the beaux of St. Louis? Were they deterred by her serious expression, her education, perhaps better than their own? Whatever the reason, we find that age 30, she's appointed as chaperone to a group of young ladies, a sure sign of spinsterhood. Now, she and Etty often travelled alone, but sometimes Etty's cousin, Clay Jordan, joined them. Here was an opportunity for Clay to get to know the real Mary, behind the seemingly stern facade. On these trips, they found a mutual interest, not just in travel, but in the arts and music. And yes, they fell in love. Was Etty a secret matchmaker? But both Mary and Clay knew what the world would suspect. By now, both uncles had died and she'd inherited a fortune. Clay was with his uncle's successful cutlery business, but so far only a sales manager. And there was the age difference. Clay was 29 and Mary now 36. They knew what gossipy St. Louis society would be saying about that. And they weren't wrong. To avoid publicity, they arranged a secret wedding ceremony in Virginia. Mary travelled first up to New York to put the press off the scent before heading for Richmond to meet Clay. The couple were married quietly in the study of the Reverend McFadden on the 25th of March, 1905, with just one guest, the faithful Etty. Now, we know all about the press looking for a juicy scandal. The local papers couldn't actually call Clay a gold digger, but headlines screamed, "Wedding caused big sensation, marriage in Richmond of St. Louis heiress, surprises, friends and relations." There were also some sly insinuations. The St. Louis Republic reported Miss Mary Laughlin Rankin, a philanthropic heiress, and Clay Jordan, both of St. Louis, slid out of town quietly some days ago, and the next thing heard of them is that they were married in Richmond. The announcement caused a sensation in social circles in their hometown. The groom is 25 and the bride is past 40, but she's rated as being very wealthy in the world's goods. So fake news was alive and well even then. There were a couple who write about such unkind gossip, which doubled the age difference between them. Sensitive about that, they touchingly split the difference on their marriage certificate, recording both their ages of 33. Putting their unkind critics to shame, their wedding was the start of a happy 40-year marriage. Then it was back to St. Louis. Now, for most brides, the next stage is the planning and decorating their new home. But Mary didn't see herself as a housewife. She had other plans. So the couple moved into a new home in apartments in the Buckingham Hotel, King's Highway, said to be the best in the city at that time, but the housekeeping skills were already catered for. The next chapter in Mary's story had begun. She continued to enjoy society, travel, and her special pastimes of horse riding and golf. How pleased she would have been to know that golf is one of the youngsters' activities in her hospital. With her unconventional approach, I was asked, was she a suffragette? And I didn't know until Mary O'Reilly of the Wednesday Club told me our Mary was an early member of this progressive St. Louis Women's Club. Suffragette speakers welcome there included the famous English Pankhurst women, and before one came to speak, the St. Louis Star and Times gave reassurances. I quote, "Businessmen of St. Louis need not worry as to the safety of their plate glass windows in any demonstration by women here. The suffragettists of this city say the tactics of Mrs. Pankhurst to make laws by breaking laws are not necessary here, as American men are so much more broad-minded than English men." Perhaps written by a male journalist. Another speaker was described as something of a radical because of her advanced ideas about women's usefulness and her right for independence. That was said just over 100 years ago. What a way we've come since then. Well, Mary must have been convinced because in 1920, she took to the stage in a play put on by the Wednesday Club to celebrate the 19th Amendment, giving women the vote. And she and Etty would have joined in this rousing end chorus. "Hurrah for Missouri, girls. We vote in Missouri to help to make the law. We're here to rally round the polls, girls. We're here to rally again, shouting the suffrage cry of freedom." In this busy life, she found time for what was closest to her heart, community works. It's notable that for Mary, charity wasn't just about giving money. She put her time, her thoughts, her experience into those causes, and she was ever practical. When one school complained it was always running out of milk, she sent them a cow. She particularly respected those striving to help themselves. Noticing young lads trying to make a living selling papers on the St. Louis streets, she helped to establish the Newsboys' Home, earning the nickname the Newsboys' Angel. When in 1911, the African American community was slowly saving for their own YWCA, the papers announced that a mystery woman had added to the fund so it could be built, the first in St. Louis for African American women, and only the fourth in the USA. That mystery woman was Mary. And here's another remarkable woman from the past we can celebrate today. For that YWCA was named after a former slave, Phyllis Wheatley, the first African American poet from the late 1700s. Mary would have sympathized with her experience as a child, which Phyllis described in this verse. I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Afric's fancied happy seat, such my case, and can I then but pray, others may never feel tyrannic sway. Another cause was the Memorial Home for the Elderly, now the Beauvays, where she was president for 20 years. A former president, the late Elizabeth Gentry, recognized her expert commercial judgment, which had set the home on a sound footing. She said, it's through her foresight, generosity, and financial planning that security and continuity were made possible here. Mary's portrait, and I can show you a picture of it here, still hangs in that boardroom where she presided over so many committee meetings. Giannetti also supported the College of the Ozarks, which offered education to children unable to afford fees. And we can gain an insight into how well they understood young folk, for they gave them a television, described at that time as the last word in modern progress, to the delight of the young audience. When Clay died in 1945, Mary wanted to make a permanent memento of his life. As they were supporters of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, she decided to found a music school, particularly as Clay was himself an accomplished piano player. His portrait is displayed in the Clay E. Jordan Music Building, College of the Ozarks, which has produced many fine musicians since then. The couple had no children of their own, but young people were always closest to Mary's heart, and she started to think what she could do for them. Ever practical, she consulted experts on the most urgent need. She was advised there was an apicular gap for children with continuing medical conditions after hospital treatment. She explored the options for somewhere for them to convalesce from the damages of the illnesses like polio and TB from those days. Mary studied hospital models elsewhere and planned what was at that time a state-of-the-art facility. The hospital was dedicated on the 9th of April, 1941, attended by 200 guests. President of the Children's Society, Dr. Archer O'Reilly, gave the address thanking her for the home. And yes, you've heard that name earlier. For Margaret O'Reilly, my contact at the Wednesday Club, is his granddaughter. Coincidence? But I believe some things echo down the years and are meant to be. Dr. Archer was appointed as the first hospital's medical head. Mary admired not only his expertise, but also his indomitable spirit, refusing to be limited by his own artificial leg. Summarizing his life's work, he said, and I should note with a term that we no longer use, I've tried to help the crippled child and crippled adult to get to the place where they can forget they are cripples. The hospital's opening wasn't the end of Mary's journey. She continued with regular visits, always emphasizing the sense of fun that we still see there today. And here's a letter written a year before her death. I'm going along very quietly. Well, no wonder at her age in the 90s. I always go to the Rankin Jordan home on Thursdays, and I have lunch with the children and try to get another day a week with them. The children are getting on nicely. The little dears are all so delicate, we keep them till the doctors want them to go home. Mary died in 1962, but her spirit lives in our hospital with her words, "Consider the children first in all that you do," remaining at its heart. When my cousin Tony, also a great niece, visited the Rankin Jordan, we were both impressed with the dedicated staff, the generous volunteers, let's hope they can come back soon, the medical equipment, but above all, so moved to see the youngsters striving to progress, to walk, to speak, efforts and determination that Mary admired so much. As I said, she avoided personal publicity. In her 91st year, an article headed, "Generous Mrs. Jordan Avoids the Spotlight," it was reported, although she's helped uncounted numbers of individuals and organizations, Mrs. Clay Jordan is probably the least known philanthropist in St. Louis. Her enthusiasm for worthy causes is matched only by her distaste for publicity. We've been talking of the past, but I like to think of the ever-spreading ripples down the years, in the present, in the future, for the many people affected by Mary, who in their turn influence and inspire others in ever-increasing circles. The newsboys who grew up to become members of the St. Louis community, the African-American young women who found security in their YWCA, the musicians bringing joy to others. And of course, the very many children who've passed through the hospital and will do so in the future, able to return to their families and become an active part of society in the future. While we recognise Mary's great contribution to the lives of others, still unfolding and onward, many of those names we'll never know individually, but no less worthy for that. With this in mind, the words of the English author George Eliot in her book Middlemarch are a fitting end to my talk, to acknowledge those hidden lives and untold stories, especially in Women's History Month. The effect on those around was incalculably diffuse, for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been, is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. Thanks very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Susan, as current board chair of the hospital, I want to thank you for this talk. It was enlightening and interesting, and it taught me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Anybody have a question?
Anyone else have questions? I think you covered it, Susan. That was incredible.
Well, I think it's interesting to find how practical Mary was, that she was willing to donate and contribute, but she really respected people that were actually helping themselves as well. And I know when I first said that, I said, of course, there were exceptions, for example, children. And it was Dr. Nick who pointed out to me that the children in the hospital are also striving. They're striving and they're contributing, not financially, but with their spirit and their determination to get better. So it's the same effort that they're making.
Exactly. No, this is great. And I think this is so much information, and a lot of us, most of us are hearing it for the first time. So we probably need to sleep on it for a little bit. And then we know we'll be seeing you a lot more, and we cannot wait for travel to be safe again so we can see you in person. Did you have something to say, Dr. Nick?
Hi again, and thank you so much for sharing more of Mary's story. Every time I listen, I get touched and invigorated to continue her great work. I and that's what I hope you can help us do more of in April when we celebrate the 8th anniversary. But in general, what advice do you have for us to really build on and keep Mary's spirit alive, and have folks here who have that feeling by what the work they're doing, but how do we live fully Mary's legacy? What more can we do to really continue that great tradition?
Well, to me, I think you're doing it so much already. And I have actually found in some of the St. Louis organizations that I contacted where Mary had made a big contribution that they don't really know her name anymore. So your hospital is really continuing that tradition. And to me, some of the things that are most impressive are the stories you share, because in terms of engaging and involving people, there are, if you like, the two aspects. There are the facts and figures, the numbers of children, etc., but also the stories. And I find it so inspiring to read the stories that you share of the children.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't think there are any more. But do you want to share your contact information, or I can send it to people? Can ask me questions and I can put them in touch with you if you want.
Yes, that would be fine. Yes.
Okay, great. So the person who's talking is me, Valerie Hoven, for anyone listening. So send it on up. And we had someone say in the chat that this was fantastic and thank you. So people are really, really grateful that you did this.
Thank you.
So hopefully another person commenting. So thank you. And hopefully we can do it soon. Susan, don't hang up. We want to take a picture with you. And people on the phone, if you do want to turn on your cameras and get a nice photo, you are welcome to, or not, but for sure, Susan, stay on. But thank you all for coming, and we hope to do this something similar again soon. And we'll be sharing and celebrating these kinds of stories for the next 12 to 18 months, and hopefully even beyond that.